Good evening, I'm Farhana Sheikh. Our top stories for tonight: Putin and Trump to discuss economic ties and Ukraine war, says Kremlin. And Trump warns Putin of severe consequences over Ukraine. All this and more coming up on AWANI International. The Kremlin says Presidents Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump will meet in Alaska on Friday to discuss the U.S.-Russia economic ties and prospects for ending the war in Ukraine. Ahead of the meet, Putin expresses belief that the U.S. is making sincere efforts to halt the war in Ukraine. He also suggests Moscow and Washington could agree on a nuclear arms deal as part of a wider push for peace. Trump and Putin will meet one-on-one, then with delegations, before holding a joint press conference. The Alaska summit will be the first meeting between the leaders since Putin met former President Joe Biden in 2021. The meeting takes place as the war in Ukraine rages on, with Russia's defense ministry claiming it has seized 2 settlements in Donetsk, and Ukrainian drone strikes hit 2 Russian cities, injuring at least 16. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is in London and has met with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer ahead of the talks. Zelensky, who visited Germany on Wednesday, is rallying European leaders to press Trump not to let Putin carve up Ukraine's territory. Meanwhile, United States President Donald Trump warns that Russia will face severe consequences if Russian President Vladimir Putin refuses peace in Ukraine. Trump describes the measures only as very severe, declining to say whether they will involve sanctions or tariffs.
Trump and Putin were preparing to meet in Alaska to discuss ending Europe's largest conflict since World War II. Trump said the summit's purpose was to set the stage for a second meeting, this time with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky present. Ahead of Alaska, European leaders and Zelensky joined Trump in a call to set clear red lines on protecting Ukraine's borders and ensuring it had a seat at the negotiating table. French President Emmanuel Macron said Trump accepted Ukraine must be involved in any talks over territorial concessions. Meanwhile, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz insisted that borders could swap by force and urged increased pressure if Russia resisted. Merz said Trump understood and strongly shared his stance, describing the exchange as exceptionally constructive.
We have more after this break. Stay tuned and don't go anywhere.
Di dalam setiap berita yang dibawa, konteks amat penting. Kami sentiasa membawakan yang tergempar dan terkini. Pastikan Astro AWANI menjadi pilihan anda, tidak kira di mana sahaja anda berada.
Buli di sekolah. Isu ini bukan perkara baru.
Buli tertakluk kepada perbuatan agresif secara fizikal.
Apa sebenarnya jerebu punca utama yang menyumbang kepada masalah ini serta kesannya kepada kesihatan kita?
Mereka akan mengalami iritasi kepada mata. Selain itu, iritasi kepada saluran pernafasan.
Welcome back. BRICS Plus commands massive population, economic weight and resource power. But can it act as a unified global bloc? We have Professor Chandra Mugan Tangavelu from Sunway University to tell us more about it.
So fairly, the current BRICS Plus controls around, I believe, 45% of the population. With China and India, you already know, they control large proportion of the population. GDP, I think around 35%. And interestingly, they control 30% of the oil resource, because Nigeria is there, Iran is there. Then, of course, Egypt, UAE, they all are there. So there's also interest to bring Saudi Arabia into this fold. So it's not an OPEC, it's different from OPEC, but it's a different representation of the South. So they also have control over the resources, especially oil, with China coming in and if Indonesia joining them, China and Indonesia controls a large proportion of the essential minerals.
Chandra added that control of oil and key minerals boosts BRICS Plus influence and attracts others to challenge Western dominance. However, he said that despite these opportunities, the group faces limitations due to differing political systems and ongoing border disputes.
There are opportunities to do that, but at the same time, there's a limitation of how much they can actually do. Because of fragmented, they have very different political system, different political agenda, and even there are border skirmishes within India, China, and also Russia. But having said that, the geopolitics is not a concrete, harmonized geopolitics, but fairly they can see the interests of the US as something interest of the West, driving them in a more coherent manner to deal with that, like the reciprocal tariff and so on. So they can emerge as a bloc, but how much of that bloc can a lot of economic growth, trade and integration, and how much of that will allow for investment yet to be seen. Because the formation is more geopolitics rather than a geoeconomics. Whereas ASEAN was formed on a geoeconomics framework than the geopolitical framework. APEC was joined more on the geoeconomic framework rather than geopolitical framework. But opportunities arise because there are avenues for, one, different kind of international finance, because Russia has been pushed out of the global international financial framework. So fairly there was some kind of thinking and agreement between China, Russia, and India that they will use ruble for trade. So that kind of dimension can appear as an alternative vehicle currency, alternative form of currency that can be experimented within the BRICS Plus countries.
As trade tensions continue to reshape global supply chains, ASEAN nations are looking beyond short-term responses and planning for long-term resilience. We explore this further with Professor Chandra Mugantangavelu from Sunway University.
So the first stage is mitigate as much as possible any of this. And the second stage is look for new markets. Every country is going to make new markets. That's where the BRICS comes in. So BRICS are not used for reciprocal tariff. It's used for new markets and innovation and so on. The third stage is strengthen ASEAN itself, which means ASEAN trade and ASEAN-based trade, the rule-based trade within East Asia accounts for 85%. So they need to strengthen that, the ASEAN, the bilaterals, ASEAN Plus One.
Chandra highlighted the need to strengthen trade while embracing the green and digital economies to drive innovation, integration, and alternative products. He also noted that the US remains a highly sophisticated consumer market capable of selling high-value products at premium prices.
So Trump wants a tax out of that high-value product. The question, who's going to pay? This is a pass-through effect, right? Producers always pass through this to the consumers. That's always a pass-through effect. So the question you asked, will they be hedging? They'll be hedging, but not BRIC will not be the key. BRIC might be new markets, and maybe the countries will consolidate towards a stronger North kind of voice, and North kind of coalition that will become stronger. And this can get stronger over time.
United States Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent warns that Washington may hike secondary tariffs on India after US President Donald Trump's high-stakes meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska. He says sanctions or tariffs could surge sharply if the Alaska talks collapse.
Earlier this month, Trump introduced a 25% penalty on India, on top of existing 25% tariff for buying Russian oil and weapons. Meanwhile, China is preparing a diplomatic push towards India amid Trump's global trade overhaul. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi will visit New Delhi on August 18th, his first trip in over 3 years. Sources said the visit aims to ease long-standing tensions between Beijing and New Delhi. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is also expected to meet Trump next month during the UN General Assembly in the United States. While attending the UN meeting, his key goal was to hold talks with Trump to resolve trade and tariff disputes. Trump's tariff threats sparked anger across India as workers, farmers and students staged nationwide protests against Trump on Wednesday.
The Trump administration plans to allocate nearly $1 billion to boost U.S. production of critical minerals and materials. According to the Energy Department, these resources are used in everything from electric vehicle batteries to semiconductors.
The funding aims to advance mining, processing and manufacturing technologies in supply chains long dominated by China and other countries. The Energy Secretary Chris Wright said that the US has relied too heavily on foreign actors for essential critical materials. The plan aligns with US President Donald Trump's executive order on maximizing energy development. The Energy Department will allocate $500 million for processing, battery production and recycling, plus $135 million for rare earth recovery. It will also provide $250 million for plants producing mineral byproducts and $50 million for refining specialized semiconductor materials.
U.S. President Donald Trump takes decisive action to safeguard America's lifeline of essential medicines, signing an executive order that launches a nationwide plan. The strategy creates a strong, dependable system to keep critical drug ingredients ready and available whenever the nation needs them most.
The Department of Health and Human Services identifies about 26 medicines vital to national health and security. To support this, the Strategic Active Pharmaceutical Ingredients Reserve, or SAPIR, is stocked with the components needed to produce these medicines. The Office of the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response leads the effort, overseeing the work from start to finish. It also ensures SAPIR can store and protect the ingredients, keeping them ready for any future emergency.
Former Administrator of the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, Helen Clark, urges donors to support local communities in leading innovation and creating their own solutions. The former New Zealand PM says philanthropists play a key role by funding bold ideas that are not yet tested in public programs.
I think that a major niche for philanthropy is innovation. Often governments and big agencies are a bit cautious. The taxpayers are watching, the stakeholders are watching, but philanthropy can give things a go that others won't. I've seen this around the world in very innovative ways of addressing climate change, addressing entrepreneurship, etc. So I would encourage philanthropy to be listening to what communities and societies want, and then enabling the innovators in those societies to really drive the change. I think that's important.
That wraps up AWANI International. Stay tuned for reports on the rivalry strategies and the shifts behind the power affairs driving the new global order. Visit international.astroawani.com for more and be sure to follow our social media accounts. I'm Farhana Sheikh. Thank you for watching and good night.
Daulat Tuanku.
Hello and good evening. I'm Melissa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Malaysia is facing a critical shortage of veterinarians. The Department of Veterinary Services recently revealed that the country has just over 2,500 active veterinarians. That's far short of what's needed to meet the growing demand from livestock farms to research labs and a booming pet care industry. So this shortfall is more than just a numbers problem. It's a question of national readiness in terms of public health, food safety, and animal welfare. So what will it take to train, retain, and recognize the veterinary workforce who play such a critical role in our food and health systems? Joining me on the show to discuss this further is Professor Dr. Goh Yong Ming, who's Dean of UPM's Faculty of Veterinary Medicine. Dr. Goh, thank you so much for being on the show with me today. From your academic standpoint, can you talk to me a little bit about how serious the current shortage of veterinarians are in Malaysia? Where are the pressure points that are being felt the most here?
Maybe, thank you for giving the intro to the topic. I guess before we even arrive at the shortage, we need to know how do we get here in the first place. You were right in saying that there were about 2,500 practicing vets now. Actually, in actual fact, in terms of number of registered numbers, we have about 3,877 as of March 2025. That is based on data from Malaysian Veterinary Council. And it wasn't an issue before because most of the vets are actually involved in various sectors. Because I like to take this opportunity as well to maybe to correct some perception of what the public has about veterinarians. People tend to associate the face of veterinarians with the companion animal practice, namely dogs and cats, where else in actual reality, they are playing big roles in food security, producing food animals, and then ensuring safe food. In fact, the very first heart transplant was done in an animal model back in 1997 in UPM using our faculty. And of course, you don't attempt it in human beings first. So those are among the roles that the vets have played. And previously, there wasn't very much a shortage because we are talking about vets that has been actively supporting the food industry. Based on the slides, based on the data that we have, the food animal industry in Malaysia is worth about 34 billion ringgit as of 2021. And then the companion animal itself, comprising of pet services and pet food, is about 2.5 billion. So we are taking 34 billion versus 2.5 billion. So in terms of importance, I think the value can translate itself. It is right that the Department of Veterinary Services mentioned that there's actually a shortage because right now we are actually at a critical point whereby those who entered service in the 1980s, 1990s are retiring in droves now. And the demographics seems to be pointing to more vets going into small animal practice or companion animal practice rather than the ever critical food animal practice, which is important for food security. And that's why I think Department of Veterinary Services is actually revealing that shortages, saying that we are actually in critical need of vets. Like what I mentioned just now, those are the areas that the vets can actually participate. But since all areas are not growing at an even pace, as a matter of fact, I can even quote that for every single food veterinarian that we have in the field, there are at least 7.5 practicing small animal veterinarian. Whereas if you look at the value industry, 2.5 billion versus for pet animal industry versus food sector, and food sector is the one that provides us with meat, milk, and eggs. So I guess it's even more critical now if we consider it.
Dr. Goh, what's causing this imbalance? Why are more vets choosing to enter small animal practice or companion animal practice as opposed to food animal practice?
I think the trend is actually not only happening here in Malaysia, it happens everywhere, to the point that USDA, US Department of Agriculture, even have to offer loan waivers to practicing veterinarians in the US to go into food animal. There are multiple factors. One of the factors will be, well, it's always more exciting to work with to work in an urban setting whereby you have clinics, where you can still keep your good balance of quality of life. That means you are still engaged with the community around you, rather than staring at farm animals in some wilderness area. It's not something that is used to be. I mean, something that is acceptable to everybody. And second thing is that I think gender also played a big role. If you look at the statistics now, there are about 43% of males versus 57% of females in the vet industry. If you look at historical data, that is what we get: 43% male, 57% females. But if you look at current trends, we actually, in terms of enrollment, women outnumbered men 3 to 1. That means 75% females. Now, this represents some kind of a challenges. We know that in order to be active in the food animal industry, you cannot farm in urban areas because there are land codes prohibiting setting up of farms and all kinds of things. So as a result, most farms will be established in suburban areas or in fringe. And because of that as well, farms are manned by mostly guys in the guise of foreign workers and so on and so forth. So any other person who wants to go into those kind of facilities will have to be of the same sex. So there will be some kind of, not to say deterrent, discouragement of for the ladies to go into food animals. No doubt there are still ladies who are actually in the food animal sector, but the number is not that many. In fact, at the university itself, when we are actually sending out students to do practical training, by the way, our students typically need to complete anything between 24 to 32 weeks of practical training throughout the 5 years training. We also need to consider all these aspects because they will be housed in proximity, not to say within the same farm as those foreign workers who are typically males. So that is also something that deters a lot of veterinarians from going into food animal practice.
Right. Just very quickly, can I look at Malaysia's veterinary education system? When we look at the system as a whole, do we have the capacity to meet both current and future demand? Do we have enough, are we producing enough veterinary graduates to begin with?
Okay, there are 2 schools producing veterinarians in the country, one in UPM, one in UMK. Our combined capacity per annum is actually about 150 to 160. We are actually rapidly increasing that to maybe about, at most, maybe about 200 a year. But we also have to consider that there are only about 110 veterinary academics in the country with PhDs. And again, the factor of age also comes in, factor of age, factor of retirement. To be very frank, my faculty, the current veterinary faculty now, we have about 71 staffs, and about 1/3 of them will be retiring, including myself, in the next 10 years. So we can actually increase the class sizes, but we have to think about how to sustain those class sizes when we do not have enough academic. And by the way, we also follow the medical teaching staff